My name is Julia Patel. After 15 years serving in the United States Army, I finally knew what it felt like to have a home base of my own. But I never imagined the first invasion of my stronghold would come from my own family. I returned after a long day at Fort Liberty, and I saw their car in my driveway. Inside, my mother was opening my kitchen cabinets like she was taking inventory of a supply depot, while my sister, Lena, stood in the middle of my living room with the look of a general who had just captured an enemy fort. She turned to me, without a trace of embarrassment, and dropped a line as cold as steel. "This place is nice. Mom said it's a little big for just you. I'll be moving in this weekend." My mother nodded in agreement. "That's right, Julia. You're a soldier. You're used to living anywhere. Lena needs stability." They thought the order had been given and that I would just obey. They didn't know that a soldier is trained to defend their perimeter at all costs. If you have ever had your sacrifices taken for granted by your own family, let me know where you're from in the comments. Please hit like and subscribe, because you are about to witness a campaign to reclaim territory that no military academy teaches. Before the invasion, there was peace. There was my fortress. It's a small 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood in Fayetteville. You know the kind, the ones built in the 70s with solid bones, tucked away just far enough from the noise of the base. It's not luxurious, it doesn't have a new build's open-plan kitchen or a fancy master bath, but it was everything I'd ever dreamed of. More than that, it was everything I'd earned. This house was bought with blood, sweat, and hazard pay. When I say blood money, I mean it. This house was paid for by the sleepless nights in Kandahar. It was built from the bonuses I got for extending my deployment in Afghanistan, living on dusty FOBs, forward operating bases, eating MREs, and counting the days until I could come home to a place that was truly mine. My ritual here was sacred. Every morning, 0600, just as the North Carolina sun starts to burn off the mist, I make a cup of strong black coffee. I sit on my back porch, listening to the birds, smelling the pines. I watch my German shepherd, Harvey, chase squirrels across the yard. I rescued Harvey from a shelter right after I got back from my last tour. Or maybe he rescued me. Here, in this space, I wasn't Sergeant Patel, responsible for the lives of my soldiers. I wasn't the strong one everyone leaned on. I was just Julia. And this little house was my sanctuary. It was the one place on earth where I could lower my shields, where I could be safe. That peace lasted until Tuesday. I was driving home from Fort Liberty, my mind already running through my evening routine. Walk Harvey, a quick workout, then maybe reheat some leftovers and watch absolutely nothing important on TV. The usual. It had been a long day of range qualifications, and the drive home is my decompression chamber. I turned onto my street, and my foot instinctively hit the brake. A familiar white Ford Explorer was parked in my driveway, my parents' car. A cold dread washed over me. This was not a pleasant surprise. My soldier's reflex kicked in immediately. This wasn't a social call. It was an unscheduled event, and unscheduled events are threats until proven otherwise. I didn't pull into my garage. I've been on enough patrols to know you don't walk into a potential ambush. I parked my car down the street under the cover of an old oak tree, and I watched. I saw my mother's silhouette through my own living room window. She was pointing, gesturing. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I knew that posture. It was the posture of entitlement. My perimeter, the one I had fought and bled for, had been breached. I took a deep, steadying breath, the kind they teach you for combat, and got out of the car. The scene inside was worse than I could have imagined. The front door was unlocked. The first thing I saw was a large pink suitcase sitting by my entryway, like a flag of occupation planted in conquered territory. And then I saw them. My sister Lena was lounging on my couch, feet up on my coffee table, flicking through my TV. "Does your Netflix account even work?" she complained, not to me, but to the room. My mother was in my kitchen. She had a tape measure in her hand. A tape measure. She was measuring the wall space next to the fridge. "This pastel blue is just awful, Julia," she said, finally acknowledging my presence. It wasn't a hello. It wasn't, how are you? It was a critique. Lena prefers a soft yellow. We'll have to repaint. We? I managed to say, my voice dangerously quiet. My father, as always, was the silent accomplice. He was over by the sink, meticulously inspecting the plumbing, turning the faucet on and off as if he were preparing for a transfer of ownership. No one said, "Welcome home." No one asked about my day. They just glanced at me, annoyed by the interruption, as if I were the maid who'd shown up early. That's when Lena, my 40-year-old sister, who had never held a job for more than 6 months, stood up. She did a slow twirl in the middle of my living room, the room I had painted, the room I had furnished with the little money I'd saved, and that's when she delivered the line. "This place is nice. Mom said it's a little big for just you. I'll be moving in this weekend." I just stared at her. My mother pulled the tape measure taut against my wall. "She's right, Julia," my mother added, not even looking at me. "Lena needs this. And you're a soldier, you're used to living anywhere. You can make do. Lena needs stability." My mind went quiet. That cold, clear battlefield, quiet. I knew in that moment that arguing was pointless. You cannot negotiate with incoming artillery. You cannot reason with a guided missile. You can only act. I just nodded. A short, non-committal nod. They took my silence as agreement. They always have. They stayed for another 30 minutes, planning their changes to my house. Then they left, heading out for dinner. "Don't wait up," my mother called over her shoulder. But they left the pink suitcase, the flag of occupation. I stood in my living room for a long time. The smell of my mother's perfume and Lena's entitlement hung heavy in the air. The silence was deafening. Then my soldier's calm didn't just break, it evaporated. But I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I got to work. I pulled out my phone and Googled 24/7 locksmith, Fayetteville. That night, well after dark, I stood under my porch light, Harvey sitting loyally at my feet, and I supervised a tired-looking man as he changed every lock on my house, the deadbolts, the handles, the back door. The sharp, metallic click and snap of the new tumblers falling into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my first counteroffensive. I had reinforced my defensive line. The locksmith finished, packed his tools, and drove off into the Fayetteville night. I stood in my newly secured hallway, the silence of the house almost deafening. Harvey nudged my hand, sensing my tension. I was safe. My perimeter was secure. But my eyes drifted to the corner of the living room, to the one piece of enemy equipment left behind, Lena's garish pink suitcase. It sat there, a monument to their audacity, a flag of occupation. I looked at that suitcase and I didn't just feel anger. I felt a deep, weary sadness. Why did I know with such certainty that they would pull a stunt like this? Because they always have. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was standard operating procedure. This was the result of a lifetime of conditioning, a family structure built on a foundation of injustice. My childhood wasn't a childhood. It was a long, drawn-out military campaign. And in that campaign, there was only one objective, one priority, one asset. Operation. Protect Lena. My sister, Lena, was the designated fragile one. I was the designated strong one. Every family resource, every ounce of emotional energy was routed to her. I remember when Lena got a D in her 10th grade history class. My mother didn't tell Lena to study harder. She scheduled an emergency PTA meeting and blamed the teacher, accusing him of not understanding Lena's sensitive nature. When Lena, at 25, had her heart broken by some guy she'd been dating for 6 weeks, the entire family was mobilized. My parents canceled their anniversary plans and took us all on a healing trip to Myrtle Beach, just so Lena could feel the ocean breeze and recover. I had to take leave from my first duty station to be there, to provide support. But the memory that still cuts the deepest, my 10th birthday. I loved science. I was a nerdy, quiet kid, and all I wanted was a chemistry set and a party with my few friends from school. My mother had agreed. The invitations were sent. 2 days before the party, my mother came to my room, a look of strained patience on her face. "Julia," she said, We have to cancel your party. I was devastated. Why? Is Grandma sick? No, she said, sighing. It's just, Lena feels left out. She says you're getting all the attention. She's very upset. Lena was 12. My birthday was canceled to manage the emotions of my older sister. I spent that day in my room, reading a library book, while my mother took Lena shopping for new shoes to cheer her up. That day, I learned my place. I was the support staff. I was the infrastructure. Lena was the mission. This system was held together by one toxic mantra, a phrase my mother repeated so often it became the background radiation of my life. You're my little soldier, Julia. You're strong. You'll be fine. She'd say it when I fell off my bike and scraped my knee. Get up, soldier. You're strong. She'd say it when I was struggling with my homework. Figure it out, soldier. You're strong. She'd say it when I was heartbroken over a high school crush. Shake it off, soldier. You're strong. It wasn't a compliment. It was an exemption from responsibility. It was her get-out-of-jail-free card for parenting. It was the justification she used to deny me the very things Lena received in excess: comfort, attention, and the right to be weak. I had to learn to tie my own shoes. I had to learn to face my own sorrows. I had to learn to be my own parent. I became strong because I was given no other choice. If you were also the strong one in your family, if you were the one who always had to be okay, because no one would be there for you if you weren't, please hit that like button to show your support. And tell me in the comments, what was one thing you were just too strong to need? My father. He was a different kind of problem. If my mother was the commanding officer of this operation, my father was the silent staging area. He was the man who enabled it all by choosing the path of least resistance. He chose peace over justice every single time. His silence was a form of agreement. His inaction was a weapon. I remember in high school, I poured my entire soul into a project on cellular mitosis. I won first place at the state science fair. I came home, my hand shaking, holding this huge, gaudy blue ribbon and a small trophy. I was so proud. I found my dad in the living room, reading the newspaper. Dad, look, I won. I won the state science fair. He glanced up from his paper. He nodded once. That's nice, Julia. Good job. And his eyes went right back to the sports section. I just stood there, my heart shrinking. A moment later, Lena wandered into the room, slumped onto the couch, and let out a dramatic sigh. She'd had a minor disagreement with a friend. My father instantly folded his newspaper. His entire focus shifted. What's wrong, honey? He asked her, his voice full of concern. Nothing, she mumbled. I feel sad. Well, he said, standing up and reaching for his keys. We can't have that. Let's go get some ice cream. He walked right past me and my blue ribbon, took Lena by the arm, and walked out the door. That was the moment I realized the truth. My mother's active favoritism was painful. But my father's indifference, his passive compliance, that was the thing that broke me. The ultimate test of this family doctrine, the day it all crystallized, was September 11th, 2001. I was 16. I remember sitting in my homeroom, watching the second tower fall on a small grainy TV. The world ended. Fear was a physical thing in the air. They sent us home. I ran through the door, my mind reeling, desperate for something. An anchor. I found my mother in the living room, on the couch. She had Lena, who was 18 at the time, wrapped in a blanket, cradling her like a small child. Lena was sobbing. It's so scary, Mommy. The world is so scary. I know, baby, I know, my mother cooed, stroking her hair. Don't you worry. I will protect you. Nothing bad will ever happen to you. She looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, shaking, my backpack still on. Our eyes met. I was pleading. See me. Comfort me. I'm scared too. Her face was blank. Then it hardened, just a little. Julia, she said, her voice firm, pulling me back to reality. Go check the mailbox. And you're strong. You'll be fine. A national tragedy. A moment of defining collective trauma. And even then, I was the soldier. She was the one who needed protection. I didn't cry. I just turned, walked outside, and checked the mail. And in that moment, I knew I had to leave. My decision to enlist in the U.S. Army 2 years later wasn't an act of blind patriotism. I wasn't just joining to serve my country. It was a strategic withdrawal. It was an escape. The Army, for all its grueling demands, offered me one thing my family never did: fairness. The Army didn't care about sensitive natures. It didn't care about feelings. It cared about performance. It was a true meritocracy. You ran faster, you got to the front. You shot straighter, you earned a marksman badge. You were stronger. You were rewarded, not used as an excuse to be neglected. The U.S. Army became the parent I never had. It gave me rules, it gave me structure, and it gave me respect. It became my family, in a way my blood relatives had never even attempted to be. The Army taught me how to survive in the most hostile environments on Earth. But this uniform, the one I had bled for, the one that had protected me from the world. I stood there, in my living room, staring at that pink suitcase, and I had to ask myself, this uniform protected me from the world, but who will protect me from my family? My uniform protected me from the world, but who would protect me from my family? I learned the answer to that question long before I ever signed my enlistment papers, long before I ever set foot in Fayetteville. The answer was no one but me. If I was going to have a fortress, I was going to have to build it myself, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. With my own 2 hands and a level of discipline they couldn't even comprehend. That fortress, my house, wasn't a gift. It wasn't an inheritance. It was the result of a 15-year military operation. I called it Operation Anvil. My private, personal mission to forge a life for myself, far away from their chaos. It started the day I got to basic training. You see, in the Army, especially when you're a young single soldier, you're surrounded by people spending money like it's on fire. They get that deployment bonus, and the first thing they do is buy a brand new Dodge Charger at 25% interest. They buy the most expensive gaming rig, or new tattoos. Or blow it all on one wild weekend in Vegas or Miami. Not me. I lived like a Spartan. My needs were simple: a clean uniform, a sharp mind, and a clear objective. While everyone else was ordering takeout and hitting the bars on Hay Street, I was in my barracks room, reading. While they were blowing their paychecks on impulse, I was at the DFAC, the dining facility, what we call the Commodore, eating for free. I became invisible. I declined the parties, the nights out. I was the boring one, the one who always volunteered for weekend duty because, frankly, it was quieter and I didn't have to spend any money. I didn't care. I wasn't just saving money. I was buying my freedom. I still have the spreadsheet. It's meticulous. I can show it to you. Every line item, every dollar accounted for, tracked for over a decade. $50, hazard pay, FOB Gambari, Afghanistan, 2013. $100, combat pay, Cobb Speicher, Iraq, 2011. $75, bonus, Kandahar Airfield, 2009. Every single dollar in my savings account has a memory attached to it, and most of them are laced with the taste of sand and gunpowder. Every line item in that Excel file cost me something. A night of sleep lost to the sound of distant, incoming mortars. A week of adrenaline sickness after a patrol went bad. A month of aching, bone-deep loneliness in a place that desperately wanted me dead. That's the price of my independence, and that's why, when I finally came home from those deployments, the feeling of isolation was so sharp. My family's welcome home ritual was always the same. They'd meet me at the airport, take a few pictures for Facebook, and we'd go out for one big, loud dinner at a chain restaurant like Olive Garden or TGI Fridays. I'd sit there, still buzzing from the 24-hour flight, my ears ringing, my body thrumming with the leftover tension of combat. And they would talk. They'd talk about Lena's new drama. Lena's latest job interview that went well, but she probably wouldn't get. Lena's fight with her landlord. After about an hour, they'd check the box. "So, Julia," my mother would say, "how was it? Hot over there?" "It was hot," I'd reply. "Well, we're glad you're back." Now, Lena was just telling us, They never asked what I saw. They never asked what I did. They never asked about the friends I lost, or the close calls, or the suffocating fear that settles in your lungs for months. My experiences were too big, too dark, too complicated. They didn't fit into the neat little box of Operation Protect Lena. My independence, the very strength they claimed to admire, had built an invisible wall. They didn't know how to talk to me, and I, honestly, had no idea how to share my world with them. So I just stopped trying. That loneliness became my fuel. It reinforced the mission. I needed a place to decompress, a place where I didn't have to pretend, a safe harbor. The need for that harbor became critical, urgent, after I lost my bunkmate from my second tour, a good soldier named Maria Ramirez. She came back from that deployment different. The VA support system was a nightmare of red tape, and her own family just told her to get over it. She didn't have a stable place to land. She didn't have a fortress. She ended up taking her own life in a cheap motel room off I-95. Her death haunted me. It cemented my resolve. Stability isn't just a luxury. It's not just a nice to have. For people like us, it's a matter of survival. I would have that safe place. I would not end up like Maria. When I was stationed at Fort Liberty for what I knew would be my last few years in the service, I began the final phase of my plan. Operation Home Base. I treated finding this house like a reconnaissance mission. I spent every weekend for 6 months driving the neighborhoods around Fayetteville. I had a clear checklist. Must be in a quiet area. Must be at least a 15-minute drive from the base to create a clean separation between work and home. Must have a solid fence for the dog I was going to get. I drove past hundreds of houses, and then I saw it. It was small, a little overgrown, but it had good bones. It was tucked away at the end of a cul-de-sac, and it had two things that sealed the deal: a strong, 6-foot wooden privacy fence and a massive, ancient oak tree in the backyard. That tree looked like it had survived 100 hurricanes. It was a symbol of resilience. These are the coordinates, I whispered to myself. This is it. Then came the final part. The execution. I did everything myself. I had saved enough for a 20% down payment, so I avoided the extra mortgage insurance. I negotiated my own VA loan with the bank, a process that is its own special kind of warfare. I sat in a sterile lawyer's office for hours, reading every single line of the closing documents until my eyes burned, making sure there were no hidden traps. And the day I got the keys, I didn't invite my family. I didn't tell a soul. I drove there alone. I walked up to that front door, just me. I remember the smell of the pine needles in the yard and the almost silent sound of the key sliding into the brand new lock. I stepped inside. The house was empty. It was quiet. And it was all mine. I didn't just move in. I reclaimed the territory. I spent the next 2 weeks of my leave stripping the old stained carpets by hand. I painted every single wall myself, a calm, clean shade of gray. I sat on the hardwood floors I'd uncovered and assembled my own furniture, piece by piece, with a simple Allen key. This house isn't just brick and mortar. It's not just a collection of wood and drywall and property lines. It is my declaration of independence. It is the physical, tangible proof that I, Sergeant Julia Patel, did not just survive. I built. I stood in my fortress, the one I had just spent 15 years building, and I felt incomplete. Proud, yes, but also terribly isolated. The locks were changed, but the pink suitcase, Lena's flag of occupation, was still sitting in my living room. I'd secured the perimeter, but the enemy was still, in a way, inside. And I knew this wasn't over. This was just the first wave. My family wouldn't just accept a locked door, they would escalate. And I realized I couldn't fight this war alone. Not really. I'd spent my whole life being the strong one, the soldier, the one who just handled it. But standing there in the silence of my house, I understood that handling it alone was what they counted on. I needed backup. I needed my other family. I grabbed my keys, locked my new deadbolt, and drove. I didn't drive to my parents' house. I didn't drive to the base. I drove through Fayetteville, past the strip malls and the car dealerships, and took a left turn onto a nondescript side street. There's a place there, hidden away, that you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. It's a small brick building with a faded sign. The Salty Dog. It's a vet bar. Not the loud, rowdy kind you see in movies. It's a haven. The moment you walk in, you feel the tension in your shoulders drop. It's warm, dimly lit, and smells like old wood, stale beer, and comfort. The walls are a chaotic, loving mess of unit memorabilia, flags from the 82nd Airborne, challenge coins pressed into the bar top, framed photos, and hundreds of unit patches from soldiers, Marines, and airmen who have passed through. It's a place where you don't have to explain yourself. And behind the bar, as always, was Leah. Leah is a force of nature. She's a former Marine Corps gunnery sergeant with fiery red hair she keeps in a messy bun and full-sleeve tattoos that tell the story of her life. She was wiping down the polished wood bar with a practiced, steady hand. She looked up when I walked in. She didn't smile. Marines don't smile, they acknowledge. She saw the look on my face, the storm I was carrying. She didn't ask, "What's wrong?" She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She just reached under the counter, grabbed a clean, heavy-bottomed glass, and then grabbed a bottle of good bourbon. She poured 2 fingers, neat, and slid the glass across the bar to me. I sat down. I didn't say anything for a minute. I just wrapped my hands around the solid weight of the glass. It was the first time I'd felt warm all day. "Patel," she said, her voice gravelly, "you look like hell." "I feel like hell," I said. And then I gave her the report. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I gave her the after-action report, just like I would a commanding officer. Family members attempted to occupy my home base, declared their intention to move in, co-opt my assets. I felt compromised. I told her about the pink suitcase. I told her about the tape measure. I told her about my mother's words. "Lena needs stability. You're a soldier." Leah listened. She didn't interrupt. She just polished the same spot on the bar, her knuckles white. The scowl on her face deepened with every word I said. When I finished, I took a sip of the bourbon. It burned in the best way. I looked at her, waiting for the judgment, waiting for the, "But it's your family." "So," I said quietly, "I changed all the locks." Leah stopped polishing. She put the rag down. She looked up at me, and a slow, fierce grin spread across her face. "Good," she snapped. "That's step 1. It's about damn time, Patel." I felt a rush of relief so powerful it almost knocked me off the stool. Validation. It was a feeling so foreign I barely recognized it. Leah leaned in. "My ex-husband, Mike. You know he was a Marine too. Killed in Fallujah. You know what his family did? While I was at Dover, waiting for his casket, his mother and brother were at our house, cleaning out our joint bank account. They took his SGLI, the life insurance, every penny, said I wasn't real family, said I didn't deserve it, that I was just the wife, but they were his blood. My God, I'd never known. I had to fight them, she said, her voice a low growl. For 2 years, with a baby. I fought them in court. I fought them in the press. I fought them at the VFW. I learned something real quick. Family is just a word. Loyalty and respect, those are actions. Blood ain't got nothing to do with it. I looked down at my hands. I still feel guilty, Leah. I feel selfish. Like I'm a bad daughter. Leah let out a short, sharp laugh. Selfish? Patel, you're a sergeant in the U.S. Army. You've spent your entire adult life in service to others. You are the least selfish person I know. Don't confuse your training with their manipulation. She reached under the bar and pulled out her phone, tapping the screen. My therapist? Yeah, I got one. Shut up. She made me read this woman. Brené, something. Brené Brown? I asked. That's the one. Leah jabbed her phone at me, showing a quote she'd saved. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. You see that? A damn PhD says so. This ain't selfishness, Julia. This is self-respect. She put the phone away and took a shot glass for herself, filling it with bourbon. Look, she said, her voice dropping into that gunnery sergeant tone that made Marines jump. In the Corps, we got a saying. There's no such thing as your land. There's only land you can take and land you can hold. That house is your land, Patel. You took it. You earned it with your own blood. Now, you gotta hold it. She looked at me, her eyes hard. Your family is trying to take it. They see your kindness, your silence, as a weakness. It's time to show them what your discipline really looks like when it's applied outside the wire. The warmth of the bourbon was spreading through me, but it wasn't just the alcohol. It was her words. The fog of guilt was lifting, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My moping was over. The planning phase had begun. Okay, I said, sliding my empty glass forward. So, what's step 2? Leah's smile was terrifying. She grabbed a cocktail napkin and a pen. All right, Operation Reclaim Territory. Step 1, fortify perimeter. She scribbled. Done. You changed the locks. Good. Step 2, go dark. Communications blackout. They're gonna call. They're gonna text. They're gonna guilt trip. You don't answer. Nothing. Silence is a weapon. Let 'em panic. Step 3, she said, underlining the words. Remove the threat. The suitcase, I said. And everything else, she said. I should put it in a storage unit, maybe? Leah looked at me, disgusted. A storage unit? Are you kidding me? No, you don't store an invasion. You repel it. You call a junk removal service, and you send every last pink, frilly piece of her crap to the county dump. You send a message, Patel. A clear, unmistakable message. She slid the napkin across the bar. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was a plan. It was permission. She raised her shot glass. They've declared war, Julia. Stop defending. She clinked her glass against my empty one. It's time to counterattack. After leaving the Salty Dog, I had a plan. I had my orders. Step 2, communications blackout. I went home and I activated it. I went into my phone settings and muted all notifications from my mother and from Lena. The silence was, at first, a relief, but within hours, the barrage began. I'd glance at my locked screen and see the battlefield. 15 missed calls, Mom. 22 text messages, Lena. A new voicemail every 5 minutes. The texts were a predictable storm of emotional shrapnel. Lena. Are you seriously locking me out? Lena. Mom is crying. I hope you're happy. Lena. This is so typical, Julia. You've always been selfish. Mom. Julia, pick up the phone. This isn't funny. You're scaring your sister. I followed Leah's advice. I held the line. I didn't respond. The old me, the strong me, would have caved. She would have called to smooth things over, to absorb their anger, to be the family's shock absorber. But the new me. She just watched the screen light up, her resolve hardening with every missed call. I let them storm for 2 days. Then I sent one single, simple text message to my mother. A small part of me, that tiny, hopeful part, thought maybe, just maybe, they would understand a clear boundary. I wrote, I need space right now. Do not contact me. I realize now how they read that message. They didn't read, I need space. They read, I am weak. They interpreted my silence, my one request for a boundary, as an invitation. As consent. I had fatally underestimated their audacity. 2 days later, I was driving home from Fort Liberty. It was a long day, a full workup for a field exercise. I was tired, covered in grime, and just wanted a hot shower and a quiet evening with Harvey. I turned onto my street, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't their Ford Explorer in my driveway. It was a U-Haul, a 15-foot moving truck, parked right on my front lawn, digging ruts into the grass I'd worked so hard to grow. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slammed my car into park and sprinted to the door, fumbling with my new keys. And that's when I saw it. The screen to my ground floor guest bedroom window was lying in the grass. The window itself was open. There were muddy footprints on the siding. They hadn't just picked a lock. They had broken in. I burst through my own front door. My house, my sanctuary, was a war zone. 2 men in uniforms I didn't recognize, movers, were carrying a pink, floral patterned sofa through my living room. Boxes were stacked everywhere, and standing in the middle of my kitchen, holding a clipboard and pointing, was Lena. She was directing them. No, no, she said, annoyance in her voice. The big one goes in the master bedroom. That one's mine. She saw me. She didn't flinch. She didn't look guilty or ashamed. She shrugged. What? What is this? My voice was a low growl. Well, she said in that sing-song entitled voice. You didn't answer your phone, so I couldn't ask, could I? Mom said to just come on in. We had to get my stuff out of storage. You broke my window. Oh, stop. She rolled her eyes. It was just a little stuck. Dad helped me pry it open. My father. The words hit me like a physical blow. My father, the silent accomplice, had escalated. He had actively, physically, helped them break into my home. Then, the smell hit me. The clean, simple scent of my home, the faint notes of coffee and wood and Harvey, was gone. It was replaced by a thick, cloying, suffocating cloud of cheap vanilla perfume. It was Lena's signature scent. It was everywhere. I looked around, my mind trying to process the violation. My calm gray walls were already being covered. She had tacky, pink, live, laugh, love signs. She had pictures of herself in gaudy frames. I walked toward my small office nook, where I kept the few things that were sacred to me. My I love me wall, as we call it in the Army. It was gone. My framed photos of my unit, the men and women I'd served with, my real family, they were gone. My commendations, gone. And then I saw it. The shadow box. The one holding the American flag that had flown over my command post in Kandahar. The one that had been folded by an honor guard and presented to me. It was gone. I felt a blind panic. I ran through the house, past the movers, and into the garage. And there, in a damp, open cardboard box, tossed in the corner like trash, were my memories. My flag, my photos, my medals. All of it piled up to make room for her junk. I stood there, shaking, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. And that's when my eyes started to water. My throat tightened and a violent, body-racking sneeze burst out of me. And another, and another. I'm allergic to cats. Not just a little sniffles allergic. I am severely allergic. My throat closes up. I need an EpiPen, allergic. Lena knows this. She's known it since we were children. I turned around, my eyes now swelling shut. And I saw it. Curled up on my favorite armchair, the one I'd saved for was a fluffy, white, long-haired Persian cat. It stared at me with pale, arrogant eyes, and then, as if to mock me, it started to purr. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't an accident. This was a biological attack. This was a deliberate, calculated move to make my own home uninhabitable for me. This was her planting a flag and daring me to take it down. As if on cue, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Mom. I answered. I couldn't even speak. I was choking on my own rage and the allergens in the air. Julia, honey. Her voice. It was sickeningly sweet, like fake syrup. Julia, don't be so selfish. I know you're upset, but your sister just needs a temporary place. Just for a few months. You broke, I choked out. You broke into my house. Oh, don't be dramatic, she trilled, laughing a little. It's just a window. We'll fix it. Family is supposed to help each other, Julia. You have your whole career. You have this big house. Lena has nothing. Honestly, you should be lucky you get a chance to help your sister like this. Lucky? That was the word. That was the word that broke the dam. Lucky. The rage that had been building in me for 30 years didn't explode. It didn't make me scream. It turned to ice. It was a cold, pure, righteous fury that solidified in my veins. I wasn't sad. I wasn't hurt. I was done. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't yell. I just lifted my thumb and pressed the end call button. I stood there in the ruins of my home, my eyes swelling shut, my lungs burning, the smell of vanilla and cat dander choking me. They had broken into my house. They had desecrated my service, they had deliberately attacked my health, and they had called me lucky for the privilege. They had crossed the red line. There will be no negotiations, only action. I pressed the end call button. I stood there in the ruins of my living room, in the chemical cloud of my sister's perfume and the suffocating dander of her cat. My eyes were burning, my lungs were on fire. But the rage, the hot, blinding, screaming anger I should have felt, was gone. It had been replaced by something else, a profound, cold emptiness, a clarity so sharp it was almost peaceful. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't smash the tacky pink decor. I just moved. I walked to the bathroom, took 2 Benadryl for the allergic reaction that was already closing my throat. Then I went into my bedroom, the one room they hadn't fully contaminated yet, and I locked the door. I didn't pack a bag. I wouldn't be driven out. This was my house. Instead, I began to pace, back and forth. 4 steps to the window, turn. 4 steps to the closet, turn. The steady, metronomic rhythm of a guard on a midnight watch. The sound of my combat boots on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the house. A heavy thud, thud, thud. And with every step, the fog of 38 years of guilt and obligation finally burned away. In that cold, quiet room, the last of my hope for my family finally died. It wasn't a sad death, it was a necessary one. I finally, truly accepted the facts on the ground. Fact. My family doesn't just not understand me, they don't want to understand me. Fact. I'm not a daughter to them. I'm a resource. I'm a logistical solution to the Lena problem. Fact. They had interpreted my lifetime of patience, my silence, my strength, as weakness, as acceptance. The truth, as brutal as it was liberating. It untied my hands. I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was too high, the Benadryl useless against it. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, the house utterly silent. I pulled out my phone. I needed to hear a voice, not a soft one, not a sympathetic one. I needed a hard voice, a voice of resolve. I opened my podcast app. I scrolled and hit play on an old episode of the Jocko podcast. His voice, that rough, steady SEAL commander's voice, filled the dark room. He was answering a question from a listener who was struggling. And then he said the words I needed to hear. The path to all the things you want is discipline. Discipline equals freedom. I let the words hang in the air. Discipline equals freedom. My God, that was it. My entire problem, in 3 words. My whole life, I'd had discipline for the Army, for my unit, for my missions. But I had 0 discipline with my family. I had let them operate without rules, without boundaries, without consequences. My lack of discipline with them had cost me my freedom, my peace, my home, the discipline that got me through the worst nights in Afghanistan. That's what I needed now. Not the soldier my mother talked about, the one who quietly endured, but the real one, the one who acted. The thought triggered a memory. I got up, went to my closet, pushing past the boxes of Lena's crap they had thrown in here. In the back, I found my old green-lidded footlocker from basic training. I dug to the bottom, under my old BDUs and worn-out running shoes, and I found it. My green government-issue snot and guts notebook, the one we all had to carry. I flipped through the pages of frantic notes on ballistics and first aid, and there it was. A note I had scribbled to myself during a 3 a.m. fire watch 15 years ago. My own handwriting. Emotions are a luxury on the battlefield. Action is what saves you. That was it. The fog was gone. The mission was clear. Emotions were a luxury. It was time for action. I looked at the clock. Joe 2:30. I didn't care. I called Leah. She picked up on the first ring, like a true Marine. Her voice was alert, not sleepy. Yeah. Leah, I said. My voice was different. The wobble was gone. It was flat, cold, the voice I use on the radio. It's Patel. Patel, she said, her tone instantly serious. What's your sit rep? Situation report. They've breached the perimeter. They're dug in. full-scale occupation. The bastards, she hissed. No, I'm sorry. Just pure distilled anger. What do you need? I need tactical advice, I said, cutting to the chase. How do I legally and effectively remove a massive obstruction from my area of operations? Fast and clean. Leah understood immediately. This was not a call for sympathy. This was a request for logistics. Obstruction, huh? I copy. I heard her typing on a keyboard. You don't want to fight, you want a solution. You're not calling a lawyer, you're calling a cleanup crew. She gave me a name and a number. It's an eviction cleanout service. They specialize in difficult removals. They're bonded, they're insured, they don't ask questions. They just clear the objective. Thank you, Gunny, I said. Give 'em hell, Sergeant. She hung up. I didn't go back to bed. I went to my kitchen table. I took a Tylenol PM to counteract the allergy meds, and I brewed the strongest, blackest coffee I had. I got a fresh legal pad and a pen. This wasn't a family drama anymore. This was an operation, and every operation needs an order. I began to write out the plan. My own OPORD. I wrote at the top, Operation, Reclamation, then the sequence of events. 0600, rendezvous. Junk removal team arrives. I will be on site to grant access. 06 swim teams, supervise removal. Team will remove all non-mission essential items, i.e., all of Lena's property. 0645, handle biological threat. The cat. Contact Cumberland County Animal Control for pickup. 0800, fortify perimeter. Locksmith arrives. Install new high-security deadbolts, window locks, and a full camera-based security system. 0900, legal support. Contact JAG office for recommendation on a civilian lawyer. File for a no-contact order. 1000. Comms blackout. All tasks complete, cut all channels. The mission is over. I looked at that list. It was cold, it was brutal, it was methodical. And it was the most beautiful, liberating thing I'd ever written. It was the sound of my own survival. It was the moment I finally chose myself. If you have ever had to make that hard, heartbreaking choice, the choice to save yourself, even if it meant starting a war, please hit that like button to show your support. And in the comments, just write one word, freedom. Because that's what this was. My plan was set. All that was left was to execute. I picked up my phone. It was now 03:15. I dialed the number Leah gave me. A sleepy, rough voice answered on the third ring. Cumberland Junk Removal. We ain't open. I used my command voice, the one that wakes up sleeping privates at 0500. This is Sergeant Patel. I have a full property cleanout, non-hazardous, immediate. I need your largest truck and a 4-man crew on site in 2 hours and 45 minutes. The man was quiet. He was probably calculating the surge pricing. That's an emergency call, ma'am. That's double rate. I'm aware, I said. I'll pay in cash. I'll be there to let you in. I looked at my OPORD, the first line item. I'll see you at 0600. No delays. I hung up. The war was on. I did not sleep. I sat in my kitchen, in my gray Army PT shirt and black shorts, drinking black coffee, and I watched the clock. The Tylenol PM and Benadryl were fighting the adrenaline, creating a strange, disconnected calm. I was no longer emotional. I was an instrument executing a task. The digital clock on my microwave clicked from 05:59 to 06 hours. Exactly on time, headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness. An unmarked, heavy-duty truck, the kind used for hauling construction debris, pulled up to my curb, its diesel engine rumbling. This was it. Operation Reclamation was a go. 2 large, tired-looking men in heavy work gloves got out. They were exactly the kind of men Leah had promised. Big, quiet, and looking like they didn't want to be here but would do the job if the cash was right. I met them at the door. I was holding a fresh mug of coffee and a thick envelope. My OPORD was in my back pocket. The lead man, who had a clipboard, just grunted. Patel? That's me, I said, my voice crisp. Here's the situation. Everything in this house that is not a major appliance or in the master bedroom is to be removed. All of it. I handed him the envelope. It was full of cash, a very thick wad of cash. This is for the job, the emergency fee, and a significant tip for speed, efficiency, and discretion. He fanned the bills with his thumb. His eyes widened just a little. And the destination for the items? The Cumberland County dump, I said, taking a sip of coffee. Everything. I want nothing salvaged. I want it all gone. He nodded. No more questions. Yes, ma'am. He motioned to his partner, and they got to work. I called it the Great Purge. I stood at my post by the front door, and I supervised. I was Sergeant Patel, overseeing a detail. I did not help. I did not interfere. I just watched. It was brutal. And it was beautiful. They were incredibly efficient. They worked with a rough, practiced speed. The pink floral sofa that Lena had been sitting on just yesterday? They grabbed it, one on each end, and threw it off the porch and into the truck with a heavy whump. The tacky live, laugh, love signs, the boxes of shoes, the cheap particle board bookcases, all of it was hauled out and tossed, without ceremony. I felt a grim, cold satisfaction. This was catharsis in motion. Every item that flew out my front door felt like a piece of my past being surgically removed. Then, one of them came out of my favorite armchair, holding the fluffy white Persian cat. The cat looked terrified. Ma'am, the order didn't say anything about pets. It's not my pet, I said, my voice hard. I pointed to the side of the porch where I had already placed a carrier crate I'd bought at Walmart at 4 a.m., along with a printed-out map. That's for the cat. It's prepaid. Take it to this address. The man looked at the paper. The Cumberland County Animal Shelter. It's a no-kill shelter, I said. A reputable one. It's the only humane act you'll see here today. Now get it off my property. It was my one act of mercy, not for Lena, for the cat. The purge continued. As they were clearing out a stack of boxes from the garage, my sacred military mementos were now safely in my car's trunk. A flimsy cardboard box broke open. Its contents spilled onto the driveway. Makeup, cheap jewelry, and a pink leather-bound book. A diary. The mover just kicked it aside, but I bent down. I picked it up. I told myself I was just going to throw it away. But I glanced at it. I had to know. I flipped it open. It wasn't a diary full of deep, soulful confessions. It was a ledger. A list of demands. The handwriting was a childish, looping scrawl. My list for the house. Tell Julia to get a bigger TV for the living room, the 60-inch one. Paint my new bedroom, the master, candy pink. Ask Mom to get money from Julia for a new white picket fence. This neighborhood is ugly. Need a new patio set for when I have friends over. Tell Julia to add me to her car insurance. I read it, and I didn't feel anger. I felt a cold, profound pity. I felt nothing. This was the final piece of evidence, the final confirmation. I wasn't her sister. I was her resource. I was a walking, talking bank account she was planning to drain. Any last, tiny, microscopic speck of guilt I had, it evaporated. I closed the book. I walked over to the truck, where the compactor was already groaning, and I tossed it into the back, into the pile of broken furniture and trash bags. It was done. At 07:45, 15 minutes ahead of schedule, the truck was full. The lead man came over, sweating. That's everything, ma'am. Good, I said. We're clear. They got in their truck and drove away, leaving a quiet, empty street. Phase 1 of operation. Reclamation was complete. At 0800, right on time, the second truck arrived. This one was from Fayetteville Security Solutions. This was not just a locksmith. This was a full-scale upgrade. For the next 2 hours, they worked. They didn't just change the locks. They installed high-security, pick-proof Medeco deadbolts on every door. They installed new locks on every single window, including the one my father had helped pry open. They installed 4 high-definition night vision cameras, one covering each approach to the house. They installed motion sensor floodlights. and I signed the paperwork for a 24/7 top-tier monitoring service. My house was no longer just a fortress. It was a fully secured, hard-target base. At 10 Numbers, the security technicians left. I stood in my living room. The pink sofa was gone. The tacky art was gone. The smell of cheap vanilla was gone. It was empty. The hardwood floors echoed with every step. The walls were bare. The house was finally clean. I had scrubbed the entire area with disinfectant, and the sharp, sterile smell of bleach and Lysol had replaced the perfume. It was the smell of a fresh start. I had won. I had reclaimed my territory. I stood in the center of the empty room, the silence absolute. So why did it feel like a loss? I had won the battle. So why did it feel like a loss? I stood in the center of my empty, sterile living room, the smell of bleach stinging my nose. The silence was absolute. That's when I realized, that feeling. It wasn't a sense of loss for them. It was grief. I was grieving the final death of the idea of family I'd clung to for 38 years. The child in me, the one who just wanted her dad to be proud of her science fair trophy, had finally let go. The woman who was left, she was a sergeant, and she was preparing for contact. I knew they wouldn't wait long. I called Leah. It's done. The house is clean. But this is phase 1. They'll be here soon. I'm on my way, she said. 2 hours later, I was no longer alone. Leah and I were sitting on the hardwood floor of the empty living room. We had mugs of black coffee and a shared, grim understanding. We were 2 soldiers in a fortified bunker, just waiting for the inevitable assault. It came, just as I predicted, on Sunday afternoon. Contact, I said quietly, not moving. I was watching my new security feed on my phone. The familiar white Ford Explorer pulled up to the curb. It parked, not in the driveway, but directly in front of the house, as if to block it in. Leah just nodded, her jaw tight. Let him come. Lena got out first. She wasn't angry. She wasn't sad. She was smug. She sauntered up my walkway, not like a guest, not even like an invader, but like the owner. She had a new key in her hand, a copy she must have made while she was here. She marched right up to my new, high-security deadbolt. I watched, fascinated by the sheer, unadulterated arrogance. She put the key in the lock. It didn't go in. She frowned. She jiggled it. She tried to force it. The new Medico lock was a solid wall of steel. Her expression shifted. The confidence cracked. Confusion. It quickly melted into pure, unfiltered, childish rage. She rattled the doorknob, a sound that echoed in the empty house. Then she balled up her fist and began to pound on the solid wood door. Boom, boom, boom. Julia, what did you do? Open this door. I just sat on the floor and took a sip of my coffee. Leah and I exchanged a look. Hold the line, Leah murmured. A moment later, the second wave began. My phone, sitting on the floor between us, lit up. Incoming call. Lena, I hit silence. It lit up again. Incoming call. Lena, silence. It lit up again. Incoming call, Mom, silence. Again. Incoming call, Dad, silence. The banging on the door was now frantic, hysterical. Both Lena and my mother were shouting. Then, the phone rang again. Incoming call. Mom, I looked at Leah. She just nodded. Speakerphone. I picked up the phone. I took a deep, steadying breath, the kind I take before a marksmanship test. I hit accept. I hit speaker. The sound that blasted into the room was not a voice. It was a shriek. Julia Marie Patel, you open this damn door right now, right now. What did you do with your sister's things? I know you're in there. The sheer volume was shocking. Leah raised an eyebrow. I waited. I let her scream for another few seconds. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was quiet. It was calm. It was the voice I use when I'm in total control. Good afternoon, Mrs. Patel. The silence on the other end was electric. The banging stopped. What? My mother stammered. This is Julia Patel, I said, my voice as cold and clean as the freshly bleached floors. To answer your question, the unauthorized items that were left trespassing on my private property have been identified, processed, and disposed of according to regulation. Processed? My mother's voice was small. Disposed of? Lena shrieked in the background. My stuff? You threw away my stuff? Then the phone was ripped away. My father's voice, the voice of the silent accomplice, came on the line. He wasn't yelling. He was pleading. And that made him the most dangerous of all. Julia, for God's sake, what is wrong with you? Stop this nonsense. Just stop. The neighbors are watching. Mrs. Green from 2 doors down is on her porch. You are embarrassing this entire family. That was it. The final desperate weapon in their arsenal. Shame. The old Julia would have crumbled. The old Julia would have done anything to avoid making a scene, to avoid the judgment of the neighbors. But the old Julia was gone. I let his words hang in the air for a beat. Hello, Mr. Patel, I said. My voice had dropped another 10 degrees. You're worried about what the neighbors think? You're worried about embarrassment? Yes, he said, grasping at the straw. It's humiliating. Now let us in. Sir, I said, and the word sir was a weapon. What's embarrassing is a grown man, a father, helping his 40-year-old daughter pry open his other daughter's window. What's embarrassing is a family of 3 trying to steal a home that I bought with my own blood and hazard pay from Afghanistan. I leaned closer to the phone. My new 4K security cameras have a crystal clear view of the curb, sir. The neighbors aren't watching me. They've been watching you for the last 5 minutes. Now, I will not say it again. Get off my property. The phone went silent. I could hear my father breathing, a wheezing, defeated sound. And then I heard Lena. She must have grabbed the phone. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She was a cornered animal. A high-pitched, venomous scream came through the speaker. You bitch! You think you're so smart? You're a bitch! I'll kill you! I will literally kill you! You're dead! I didn't react. I just looked at Leah. Leah's eyes were wide. She wasn't angry. She was impressed. She slowly, deliberately nodded her head. That was it. The legal trigger. The final piece. I kept the line open. Dad, Mom, are you still there? I asked, my voice still calm. I am a sergeant in the U.S. Army. I am a decorated service member, and I have just been credibly threatened by a hostile individual on my property in front of witnesses. I hung up the phone. I didn't pause. I didn't hesitate. My fingers, steady and sure, dialed 911. Leah sat there, watching me, a look of profound respect on her face. 911, what's your emergency? My voice was back to being Sergeant Patel. Professional, clear, reporting facts. Yes, this is Sergeant Julia Patel, reporting from my address. I have 3 individuals trespassing on my property. They have been verbally warned and are refusing to leave. One of the individuals has just issued a direct, violent threat against my life. Quote, I will kill you. I am secure inside my home, but I require immediate police assistance to remove them. Understood, ma'am, the operator said. Officers are being dispatched. I hung up. I placed my phone, screen down, on the hardwood floor. Outside, the yelling had stopped. My family must have seen me through the window, seen the phone to my ear, seen the finality of the act. The silence that fell over my front yard was absolute. Leah and I just sat there, in the quiet. And then, we heard it. Faint at first, a high-pitched wail, cutting through the quiet Sunday afternoon. Getting closer, louder. The unmistakable sound of approaching sirens. The sirens grew louder, a piercing wail that ripped through the quiet Sunday afternoon. Then, red and blue lights washed over my empty living room, painting the bare walls in frantic flashing strokes. Leah and I just sat on the floor, unmoving. Showtime, she said quietly. I met the 2 Fayetteville police officers at my newly secured front door. Leah stayed back in the living room, a silent, visible witness. The officers were all business, professional, with that tired look of men who have seen far too many domestic disputes. "Ma'am, you're Sergeant Patel? You're the one who called?" the senior officer asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "I'm the homeowner." Outside, on the sidewalk, my family was huddled by their Ford Explorer. My mother spotted the officers and immediately switched tactics, rushing forward, her face a mask of practiced hysteria. "Officers, thank God, that's my daughter. She's not well. She's locked us out. She's stolen." The officer put up a firm hand, cutting her off. "Ma'am, I need you to stay by your vehicle. I am speaking with the resident." He turned back to me. "Okay, Sergeant, what's the situation?" I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I gave them my report, just as I'd given it to the 911 operator. "This is my property, officer." I handed him the folder I'd prepared. My mortgage documents, my driver's license with the matching address. These three individuals, my parents and my sister, were informed yesterday that they were not welcome. They returned today, trespassed on my property, and refused to leave when asked. And the threat? My sister, Lena Patel, threatened my life. She stated, quote, "I will kill you." My friend, Ms. Leah, was a witness to the entire event. My new security cameras also recorded it. I pointed to the new high-definition camera above the door. The officer's entire demeanor changed. This was no longer a family squabble. This was a verifiable, documented, legal event. He sighed, walked down the driveway, and confronted my family. I couldn't hear every word, but I saw the dynamic. My mother tried to cry. My father tried to reason, to talk about family. Lena just looked indignant. The officer was unmoved. "Sir, do you have a deed to this house? Do you have a key? Do you have any proof you live here?" They had nothing. I had everything. The officer gave them the final order. They were to leave the premises immediately. They were being issued a formal warning for criminal trespassing. If they returned, if they even set foot on my lawn again, they would be arrested. I watched from my doorway. I watched my mother's tears of rage. I watched my father's face crumple in public humiliation. I watched Lena, for the first time in her life, utterly defeated. The image of the three of them, climbing back into their Ford Explorer and driving away under the flashing lights of the police car. That was the image of the end. The final, necessary rupture. When the adrenaline of the confrontation finally faded, the exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. Leah had gone home, and the house was silent. I felt a profound sense of relief, yes, but also a deep, aching sadness. I was grieving, not for them. I was grieving for the idea of them. The idea of a family that I had carried in my head for 38 years. That night, I was grieving its death. The next battle, as expected, was fought on a different front: social media. Just as Leah had predicted, Lena launched her smear campaign. She posted a long, tearful, rambling essay on Facebook. It had a picture of her, looking heartbroken. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. I don't know what I did to deserve this. My own sister, a soldier, turning her back on me. She's a heartless monster. She threw me and all my things out on the street. I'm homeless and I'm so scared. Please, pray for me. The initial comments were exactly what she wanted. "Oh, Lena, honey, I'm praying for you. This is horrible. Your own sister?" I can't believe Julia would do this. I watched the comments roll in. I didn't engage. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Because my real family, my chosen family, stepped into the breach. A comment appeared from a buddy in my old unit. "Wait, Lena, is this the same house your sister bought with her own combat pay from Afghanistan? The one she worked 15 years to afford?" Another from a military wife. "Why are you homeless? You're 40. Aren't there jobs in Fayetteville?" And then Leah, in all her glory. "Hold on. Threw you out? Or called the cops after you broke into her house, destroyed her property, and threatened to kill her? Just checking." The tide turned. The logic bombs were landing. The post went from a sympathy fest to an interrogation. It was quietly deleted by midnight. A week later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. My Aunt Cheryl, my father's sister who lived in Ohio. I braced myself. She was the family matriarch, and I was sure I was about to be scolded. "Julia Marie," she said, her voice stern. "Your mother called me, hysterical. I have heard the most terrible story. I want to know what on God's green earth you did to your family." The old Julia would have apologized. The new Julia was just tired. "Aunt Cheryl," I said, my voice flat, "do you want to know what they said? Or do you want to know what happened?" There was a long pause. "Tell me what happened." So I did. I told her everything. The 10-year-old's canceled birthday party, the 11-9 "you're strong" comment, the blood money, the breaking and entering, the cat, the death threat, the 911 call. I spoke for 10 minutes, uninterrupted. On the other end, there was just silence. When I finished, the silence stretched on. I thought she'd hung up. Finally, I heard her take a long, ragged breath. Her voice, when it came back, was no longer stern. It was heartbroken. "Oh, honey," she said, and she was crying. "Your father, his mother used to do that to me. I was always the strong one. I never thought he would do that to his own daughter." She sniffled. "You did the right thing, Julia. You did what I should have done 40 years ago. You did the right thing." I hung up the phone and cried for the first time. Not for sadness, for validation. One person, just one in my entire bloodline, saw it. The fallout was predictable. Aunt Cheryl kept me updated. Without me as a financial buffer, the full weight of Lena's parasitic lifestyle fell on my parents. They had to sell my dad's beloved bass boat to pay off the credit card debt Lena had racked up. My mother's health, already fragile, took a downturn from the constant stress. "Don't you feel guilty?" Aunt Cheryl asked me one day. I thought about it, long and hard. "No," I said, and I was surprised to find it was true. "I feel sad for them. I truly do. But I don't feel guilty. I didn't cause their collapse. I just refused to be the support column holding up their rotten structure anymore." That was the final step. I was sad, but I was not responsible. I was free. It was time to make it official. I sat at my computer. I opened my email. I wrote one final, unemotional message to Mom, Dad, Lena. Subject, future communication. "This is to confirm my decision. I am requesting no further contact. Please respect this boundary. I will not be responding to calls, texts, or emails. I wish you the best." I hit send. Then I opened my phone. I went to my contacts. Mom, tap, block, Dad, tap, block, Lena, tap, block. I went to Facebook, block, block, block. I had completed the final step. I had reestablished my perimeter, this time for good. I stood up from my computer, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt light. I felt free. The day I blocked my family, I expected to feel a dramatic surge of power. I didn't. Freedom, I learned, isn't a loud explosion. It's a quiet morning. Months passed. The angry, buzzing silence from my family eventually faded into just silence. And my life, for the first time, settled into a new rhythm. The rhythm of peace. I woke up in my own home, my sanctuary. And the first feeling I felt wasn't dread. It wasn't anxiety. It wasn't the need to check my phone for incoming attacks. It was just calm. I'd make my coffee, and my new security system, the one I'd installed in a panic, would give a soft beep as I disarmed it for the day. That sound, once a symbol of my war, had become the sound of my peace. It meant all secure. My home was no longer a fortress under siege. It was a sanctuary. Harvey and I started a new tradition. Every weekend, we'd go for long, quiet hikes in the woods around Fayetteville. We'd walk for miles, just the two of us, and the only sounds would be the crunch of pine needles under my boots and Harvey sniffing happily at a new trail. I was breathing air that wasn't laced with tension. I was, finally, just being. But healing, I found, isn't a solo mission. It's not just about what you build for yourself. It's about what you give back. My chosen family headquarters, the Salty Dog, became more than just my safe harbor. It became my purpose. Leah had started a new, informal sisterhood night on Tuesdays, and she'd asked me to just be there. It started small. A few young female soldiers, still in uniform, would come in, looking lost and stressed. They were navigating their first deployments, their first terrible bosses, and often their first toxic family demands. I became a sort of unofficial mentor. I didn't preach, I didn't give lectures, I just told my story. I remember a young private, barely 20 years old, who was crying at the bar because her parents had demanded she co-sign on a loan for them and had called her unchristian when she hesitated. I sat down next to her. I told her about the pink sofa and the U-Haul. I told her about the power of financial independence. I told her the first thing every soldier needs is what I called a go bag for relationships, a private savings account, an exit strategy, a line in the sand that you never let anyone cross. And I taught her the single most important tactical word in the English language: no. No is a complete sentence. No is a defensive perimeter. No is not an act of aggression. It's an act of self-preservation. I had taken the poison of my own experience, and I'd turned it into an antidote for them. I had turned my war into a lesson, my pain into a shield for others. That, I realized, was the true legacy. Not the house, but this. About a year after the confrontation, I got a letter. Not a text, not an email, but a real, handwritten letter. It was from my Aunt Cheryl. I was nervous to open it. I hadn't heard from her since our one validating phone call. Her note was short. She was just checking in. She told me the news from back home. It wasn't a request for me to come back. It wasn't a guilt trip. It was just an update. She wrote that my parents, after months of her urging, had finally started going to a therapist, and she wrote that Lena had gotten a part-time job at a local craft store. There was no apology, there was no grand reunion. But as I read the letter, I felt a quiet, distant sense of peace. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I just felt calm. It was the first sign of a change, a crack in the old, rotten foundation. It wasn't my change to manage, but it was change nonetheless. I found myself quietly rooting for them, hoping they'd find their own peace. But I was rooting for them from a safe, secure, permanent distance. That's the story. It ends not with a bang, but with a quiet evening. It's a cool North Carolina fall. I'm sitting on my back porch. I'm not drinking bourbon anymore. I'm drinking a mug of hot chamomile tea. Harvey, now a little older, a little grayer, is sleeping peacefully at my feet. My new security system, the one that covers every angle, gives a soft, single beep as the perimeter floodlights turn on for the night. All secure. I'm looking out at the small vegetable garden I planted this spring. The tomatoes are gone, but the kale and the collard greens are thriving. I'm a soldier. I'm not a gardener. But I'm learning. It felt good to put my hands in the dirt, to nurture something, to build instead of destroy. I thought about the battle I'd fought to win this peace. I thought about the scars and the cost. I remembered a line from Psalm 23, a line that had been drilled into me in childhood. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I used to think that Valley of the Shadow was a physical place, like Kandahar. I realized sitting there that the darkest valley I ever walked through was the valley of my own family's dysfunction. And the rod and staff that comforted me? They weren't from a higher power. They were the things I had built for myself. My rod was my discipline. My staff was my self-respect. They were the tools that got me through. I am the commander of my own life. The greatest battle of my life wasn't in Afghanistan. It was right here, in Fayetteville. It was the war to defend the small, sacred territory of my own inner peace. And in that war, I am the supreme commander. And I had, finally, won. I shared my story, not because it's unique, but because I know I'm not alone in this battle. If you listened this far, maybe you're a Julia too, the strong one who had to build their own fortress. Now, I want to hear from you. What's one boundary you set that made you feel free? Let's fill the comments with our stories and show others they aren't alone. If you found strength here, please hit like and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community, a chosen family, right here. Thank you for listening.